They've been amongst the most dejected in the EFL in recent times, but Birmingham fans seem a lot happier ahead of the new season. Here's why. We'll get to the good news in just a minute, but it might just briefly be worth reminding ourselves the Birmingham backstory here. After 7 years out of 9 in the Premier League, Birmingham were relegated to the Championship in 2011. They missed the chance to bounce back in Season 1, losing in the playoffs, and have been in the Championship ever since. There was a great escape in 2014 with that famous last gasp Paul Caddis goal, keeping Blues in the division. And all of this was going on under a regime so murky that owner Carson Young would end up in prison for what we'll just describe as financial improprieties. But not to worry, Young out and new custodians Trillion Trophy Asia arrived in 2016, and they're going to sort everything out, aren't they? And hopefully your sarcasm radar is sounding, because they didn't. It's been an absolute disaster. Trillion became immediate pantomime villains amongst English football fans when they replaced Gary Rowett with Gianfranco Zola early in their reign. Rowett was doing fine. Blues barely won a game under Zola, and Harry Redknapp came in to rescue them. But at what cost? He left early next season, but not before some truly mental transfer business and contracts were handed out. There was Steve Cotterill and then Gary Monk. He seemed to be doing all right, but at that point, the spending tail kind of caught up, and Blues had the distinction of becoming the first EFL side to be deducted points for breaching the relatively new then FFP rules. Thankfully, there was Che Adams, and even more thankfully, Jude Bellingham. Those guys raised huge transfer fees to bail Birmingham out, whilst they were simply stagnating, and the ownership seemed to have checked out. Turned out that we barely knew who they were, such was the murky way everything was set up and shrouded in mystery. Then there was Pep Clotet, Aitor Karanka, Lee Bowyer, and if you ever wanted a metaphor of a club being left to rot by its owners, at this point parts of the stadium needed to be closed off due to structural issues. This all brings us up to present day, or last season indeed, where John Eustace did a good job throughout all the chaos, but in the stands the fans finally ran out of patience and started to properly protest regularly, with that goal of getting the owners out and new ones coming in to bring the club back from its knees. Finally, just yesterday, in fact, the takeover was rubber stamped. We've been waiting for the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and it's over. The near 7-year Trillion ownership comes to an end. Now, I tweeted to Birmingham fans to get their reaction, and to say they were pleased would be somewhat of an understatement. So, who indeed are Birmingham's new owners? They are Knighthead Capital, led by Mr. Tom Wagner. We've gone from not knowing who the owners really are, let alone any communication, to Wagner writing an open letter to fans on the club's website outlining promises and his vision for the club. Now, of course, we know words and promises are one thing, delivering on them is something totally different, but it's already a big sea change, and if they do deliver on half of what has been said, Birmingham could start to become a lot more competitive again in the immediate future. The evidence in the transfer market, which you think would have the new ownership's fingerprints on, is really good. Yes, Taif Chong and Joe Bellingham have gone out, but the group of players coming in looks really fun, with the most recent arrival, Shriki Dembele, joining Bielik, Miyoshi, Roberts and Laird, an exciting window that could see John Eustace building an exciting team. When you consider that Eustace started last season well, with essentially zero stability and little backing, then you can see why the start of this season would be met with optimism in these different circumstances. When it comes to ownership changes, I'd like to think I can speak firsthand about what's happened from my experience at my team Ipswich. Okay, Marcus Evans wasn't quite as mysterious as Trillion, and Ipswich never breached FFP, but they did go one stage further and actually make the drop down to League One for the change to actually be made. Such a change can completely change the mentality of a fan base from negativity to optimism, and then the energy of the club can switch to something very different very quickly. Now, before I get it in the comments that I believe in unicorns and rainbows, I'm not, of course, naive enough to think that a change of owner guarantees absolutely anything at all, but the signs are good and the proof will be what it's going to be. What I do know is that football clubs mean a lot to football fans, and the Blues fans are good people who have the same hopes and fears as me, you, or any other football fans. So, I for one am pleased to see how happy they are, and hopefully that something so meaningful to them is going to be treated with a little bit more respect than it has over the past 7 years. Let me know what you think in the comments. Are Birmingham back, and what impact do you think this takeover is going to have? By the way, we're going to talk Chong, Dembele, etc. in our next transfer update video. But in the meantime, click here to see our last transfer update episode with a 10 million team into Southampton and me getting very carried away about Ipswich signing a striker.